This is Dame Billie Miller, her life in focus. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. As always, I'm pleased that you have joined us. In this episode, Dame Billie pursues her career in the legal profession, and that includes a short stint in the court of law. More importantly, you will learn how she used her training in law to improve the lot of many. You'll also learn of her association with the women's movement.
I then started my practice. I discovered early that crime was not for me. It was mostly work that you would get from people who had next to nothing at all. And I couldn't handle the crime. I mean, you go all up to the prison. I remember once Louis Tubb was coming out and I was going in to see a client. He said, "Billie Miller, you come here?" I said, "Yes." "But you up here?" He said, "Look, this isn't a place for a woman to be here." I said, "But the gentleman here always escorts me over." He said, "Yes, but be careful with them." Terrorizing me. Well, I wasn't terrorized. Nothing really frightens me. And I did not like it. They would lie to you. Go to this place, and there's always out in St. Andrew and up in some hill in St. Joseph. And I went and get the people. I wouldn't be a boy not here named that. Never had a boy named so. They just, for the sake of it, I don't know what they expected that I would be able to do. Good gods. But I didn't like that. I was looking at the law more as a jump-off point for me to change some things that needed change. Family planning was just right for me because I was greatly concerned. If only the people who are talking about the pandemic could hear me now, about the number of vaccines. You hear me, young gentlemen? My generation, you could not go into school term, the first term in September, without the smallpox vaccination. The first vaccine I ever had was going to school. And at the beginning of every school year, you had to have it and bring in the certificate that the doctor is signing to say that, you know, you've had the vaccination. And we've had so many since then. When polio broke out in Trinidad in the mid-50s, you can't wait to get to the doctor to get the jab. Smallpox, all these things were known in this part of the world. And not only in this part, it was rampant in Africa, rampant in India and so on. And I mean, we thought nothing of having a thing except that you might get a sweet, you know, afterwards, if the nurse nice. Sometimes they will walk with a pocket with the things they give you. But that was very, very important. So in the 1970s, I think that the Democratic Labour Party was beginning to feel the comeback of the Labour Party, because Tom Adams then became the leader of the Labour Party, and our party was a serious party. You know, you had to go to meetings when you had to go, and annual meetings, oh Lord, general meeting, oh dear. You fill up the steel shed twice, and 3 times. You couldn't fit in everybody. that was the beginning, although I did not recognize it as such then. I was viewing politics as something that somewhere in the future that might happen. But I did not see that it was overtaking me yet. Tom Adams, the women's movement had started up, and that's another one. Next thing I know, they dragged me into it. Well, I didn't have to be dragged. I actually voluntarily went. And they then determined that I would be their legal advisor. And there was a gentleman, a very nice gentleman. He had a restaurant down the Pelican. The chap who is on the calling programs. Not his dad. I think that would have been his granddad. I may be wrong. But he had a beautiful restaurant. And we would go down there, this group of women, 6, 7, 8, 9, a dozen of us sometimes. And from every political persuasion. And we would have our lunch. And then we would want to linger, so we would ask them to bring some more water. We can't afford juice. And he was so nice, he would come and he would say, you can stay as long as you like. That's all we want to hear. And that's where we would have our meetings. Then they had this big, for the first time ever, you know, this women's conference. And it was, no, that was not in Russia. That was in Germany. And I remember they were insisting that we all go and see some of the horrible things that the Germans had done in the Second World War. And I refused to go. I said, I'm sorry, I don't have to go and gaze at other people's sorrows and everything that came out of that. When I went to oh dear. I'm bad with remembering names and places. I'm definitely aging. Israel. We had someone who represented Barbados. He was an Englishman, but he was Jewish. Very nice man. And he picked me up at the airport when I went in. I was really not going there on government business. I was going there to a meeting to do with women. And breakfast, they brought the largest, most wonderful looking pancakes I ever saw. And I lathered mine with honey. Can you believe that when I get up now in this big, big meeting room and I'm to make my speech, I fainted. Too much sugar in my system. Rushed up and so on, called the doctor and so forth. I said, just a minute. Let me finish making my speech, please, and then I will go up to bed. You don't know the Israelis and the Jews, but you know, everything is, we send up some tea. About gallons of tea was coming up every minute, the door knocking to somebody coming with a teacup, and But that was an eye-opener too about politics. And I got to understand about the distinction between Palestine, still going on today, and, well, modern Israel. Beautiful place, but there were things I didn't think that I wanted to see. What they did take me to see, because I was then a Minister of Health, was a hospital. They took me to something that looked like a small church. The window, the windows were beautifully painted and decorated. And I wanted to see Gethsemane, but I couldn't fit that in. But I had my own view now of the politics of that part of the world, because they took us to the Red Sea, and there was a very interesting woman. She was, I think she was a Democrat, not a Republican. She was an American politician. It was all politicians, women and so on. And we went to the Red Sea. She was quite a sizable woman, but you know, everything floats. And there she was, floated away with a hat on. Can you see her now? Oh my goodness gracious. But if you're listening correctly to things you want to hear, you can hear things. I discovered then that, you know, we have a fountain, a water fountain, outside of what used to be the old Supreme Court and the library, Montefiore. There's a Montefiore fountain in more countries than I could have believed. And there was one. The hotel where I was staying, I could look out of my window and see it in the garden, which was like down in a gully, which you had to cross to get over then to see the things that everybody wants to see, you know, where the burial was, where this was, the other, third and fourth. My father had produced The Man Born to be King by Dorothy L. Sayers 3 years in a row. Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and Easter Sunday. So I could tell them the whole script by heart. It was something out of this world. All of us, the little children, all our cousins and school friends, we were in the crowd. When it was time to be having the leaves, the palm leaves, and shouting Hosanna, Hosanna, we were in that, wearing burlap, woo, and everything itching you. And then the next scene we were in was crucify, crucify. We were in the children straggling, and the grown-ups were shouting it. Some very interesting people were in that. The late, oh my goodness, he used to sing. He had a great voice at St. Mary's, in St. Mary's choir. Oh gosh, what is his name? I have it somewhere in there in a.
Brian's grandfather?
No. He was one of the thieves on the cross. My father insisted on real crosses, you know. He built at Kensington Oval a set that you would have if you were filming. And a lot of the people who were in that play came from St. George. Pilate, I remember him. Gilmore Rochford was Pilate, and his wife in real life was his wife in the play as well. And I can remember, we were like in the crowd shouting Hosanna, Hosanna, and then crucify, crucify. But I can remember so much of it. I can remember when she was saying, because when we were not running about in the crowd, we went then to the back where the lights were not, and I was listening to every word. And I could remember when she said to him, Pontius, I beg you, have nothing to do with that man. Because he did not know that she was secretly going to listen to some of his preachings. And she was in awe of that man. Pilate hated the fact that he did not have Herod's job, because Herod was a tetrarch. All this history is still in here. Herod was a tetrarch. That means that he was in charge of 3 districts, so to speak, and Pilate only had 1. And he was, I wash my hands of that, done with that. It had to be realistic. My father went to the library and looked in books to see what Roman soldiers wore. There was a tailor who made, it was either red or the colors that Romans wore in those days, and purples and so on, which would tell people if you were high up or low down, you know, on the totem pole. And the synagogue was a huge building made of, you know, flimsy wood, but this, it was a set, and the 3 crosses at the far corner. Gollop, Mr. Gollop, who was working with Daddy when he had social services. No, that would be his uncle. He was sent, Daddy sent him to Wales. We had an English woman here called Betty Yarn. And that was what I thought I was going to be when I grew up. I wanted to be like doing the kind of work she was doing. She was into all the social studies and the social sciences and so on. And so Mr. Gollop went, and he picked that up as well. I could remember when they had the first factories in Barbados making clothes and things, like up in Christchurch and all over. They had these new estates doing that. He thought that the best way, because he couldn't get through to the men in Barbados, that you just can't go on having 16 and 18 children now, not in that time. And what he used to do, he would go to these estates and at lunchtime ask if he could go in and tell them straight, you can't take any time from us. When the bell rang, they got to go back to work. He said, that is all right. And he explained to men why you have now to space your children. And he explained to them about condoms and things. This was new to men. And he did a great job. And but Betty Yarn, because Daddy would come home and tell us everything that was going on. And when I heard the things that she was doing, and then he opened all these social centers. His portfolio was health and social, services. Everything was social services. But what I was saying is that the women's movement between 1970 and 1976 had come a very long way. It had made its presence felt. As I said, they sent me all up in East Germany. It wasn't rejoined yet. And they got very upset because I didn't want to go to, there's a humongous cemetery and so on. I didn't think I needed to see that. And they got very angry with me. And I took the next plane back out. But in the 70s, the women's movement was growing and growing and growing. There was a woman, she was an American woman with strong Barbadian connections. And she was a piece of work. Her number, I'm trying to remember what her name was, but let's say it was Annie Brown. This is how her telephone book described her. The Annie Brown. She stood up to all men, and she had good organizational skills, and she was one of the driving powers of that group of women who, and it growed like Topsy, you know. But the point is, people were respecting it, and more women of every class in Barbados felt that they could be part of it. And that was the most important thing. So I knew that they would be at my back.
And yes, they were at her back. In 1976, on the same day in which Sir David Simmons took his seat in Parliament, the then parliamentary representative for the city of Bridgetown, Elliot Motley, now Sir Elliot, announced his resignation. And here began a career in elective politics for Dame Billie Miller. Dame Billie carefully places the event in true perspective.
Elliot Motley, now Sir Elliot Motley, he ran there because his father was Mr. Bridgetown, literally. He was the first and last mayor of Bridgetown. And I remember the by-election. We all went, because by-elections are like that. You can have the whole party got to come and help in the campaign. And he went off to New York, to the RUN office there as Consul General, and took his whole family. So Mia would have had her education beginning, you know, at the level of what we would call infants, you know, and it's amazing how things knit themselves together as time goes by. But I was shocked. I couldn't understand. Tom Adams walked into my law office, one end of James Street, and where James Street and High Street met, upstairs. Put his briefcase on my desk, leaned over on it. He was a very tall man, you know. And he looked straight at me and he said, "Get ready to run in the city." I put my hand to my mouth. I went into shock. I said, "Something happened to Elliot." He said, "You know, you live in another world." Mind you, he'd only just heard that downstairs in the court. Fellows were talking at the bar table, and this thought was going around. So I said, "Well, what do I do?" But he said, "You start to prepare." But I learned a lot just by watching my father when he was doing, you know, election time and so on. I remember the 51 election. I remember the 56 exceedingly well. I even remember when we had the federal experiment very well. So I knew what you had to do, you know, to pull your group together, and I did. I held a meeting upstairs at headquarters at 111 Road Street. That's why my car number is S111. And Labour Party's through, there's no changing that. And I then, Bucky Seal, he was a very well-known barber, but he was the representative for the city of Bridgetown on the Labour Party's executive, you know, so naturally I had to go to him, although he lived next door to my father's ice factory, so I knew him very well. But I went to him and paid my respects, and I said, "Well, I need to begin to put my campaign team together." And he said, "All right." He's a good organizer and so on. Started to do that. We had time, and then there was another by-election which was coming up in February, the 26th of February, I'll not forget it. That was in St. Philip. David Simmons was going to be the candidate there, yeah. And my election day was the 12th of May in 1976. I got a phone call one Sunday morning. It was Easter Sunday. I know I'm an Easter person, through and through. And I was making my bed with hospital envelope corners, as my mother taught me. She was a nurse. And to this day, I do that up to this morning. And somebody telephoned and said, "Your election date is going to be the 12th. I didn't panic or anything. I mean, I was underway already. I had my notebook, always write down things and so on. And Tom Adams was very kind. He came to me one evening and he said, one day, in fact, and he said, I'll walk with you this evening. He took me straight to Baxter's Road. And I told him something that he would never have known. I said, you know, the first year of my life, I lived on Baxter's Road. The end going into Bridgetown, in what is now the Cermak Laundry. And my mother and father and I lived upstairs, and my father had his workshop downstairs. This is before he built his ice factory. And he was surprised at that. And knowing me as he did, he said, you're not going to let anybody forget that, are you? I said, you better believe it. That's how I'm going to greet people. I am a Baxter's Rhodian. But anyhow, he took me first to the Pink Star. I am not a drinker. But, you know, the Pink Star was always full of groggies. And introduced me. They were very nice, chatted up and so on a few, and then we went across the road to, what's his name? He was murdered many years ago. That hurt me to the quick. Jono? No, it wasn't Jono's. Why can't I remember his name? But he had a place over on the other side. Groggies would be out there too. And then he took me to Chapman Lane. Said, there's a fella here called Griffo. And he is the person who will be your campaign manager here. I said, all right. So we stop. Tom drops me off. My car is up in Robert Street at Late Party headquarters. And then says, bye-bye. Shouts up Griffo. Griffo comes to me in a tall, slender man. He looked me up and down like this. He said, so you gonna be the candidate? You're the Billie Miller? I said, yes, sir. And I'm very pleased to meet you. I am hoping that you will be my campaign manager. Oh, he said, I have the lists with me all the time. He goes to sleep with him in the bed, you know. The list always had gravy stains and water stains, and he wasn't all that keen about coming to branch meetings and the others would complain. You see how you favor Griffo? I said, Griffo is home with the list. He even sleeps in the bed with it. So don't pick on Griffo.
The story of Griffo and the exciting events of the May 1976 by-election in the city of Bridgetown will be discussed in another feature. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Thanks for staying with us. This has been Dame Billie Miller, her life in focus.